This has no place in our schools and public education. Our kids aren't even learning how to read, and we're telling them they've been born in the wrong body.
You look at the LGBTQ community.
There's no such thing as LGBTQ community. There's LGB and there's T and Q.
If we're going to care about all the students, then we need to care about all the students.
These things are just inflammatory, like bright, shiny objects.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Tiffany, I swear.
Then let me say it for her. No, you're wrong.
You're gonna personally commit right now that you're gonna go find those history books and you're gonna make sure that they don't say enslaved people should be grateful.
There were slaves that materially benefited by selling services.
I say that's indoctrination.
You were telling my child that enslavement was slightly beneficial for them. No, it was not.
It's not indoctrination.
Listen, but it's not indoctrination.
Indoctrination means, can I just define indoctrination?
No.
The 2024 presidential election is right around the corner.
Our public schools have been taken over by the radical left maniacs.
And our candidates have very different ideas about how
They want to ban books.
and what we should teach our young people. Today, in the first of our Free Press Swing State debates, I'm in Florida to speak with a diverse group of voters about the changes they want to see in American education. I want to start by asking everyone how you got into education. Why don't we start with you, Iman?
Sure. Hi. So I got into education the day my son was born and went to school and recognized that I didn't want to be in a regular public school. He hated it. The teachers hated it. So I started a network of very passion-based, joy-filled micro schools, and that's what I do now.
I wanted to be a teacher from the time I was really little. Started teaching in my elementary school that I went to as a child and did not like what I saw. There were, the curriculum was outdated, textbooks were outdated, we barely had computers. We were talking about putting my sons at the time in the local Catholic school. And I was like, I'm a public school teacher. We're not doing that. Are you kidding me? And my dad was like, well, you're the one who's not happy with things. I said, no, I'm not happy, but I'm not bailing. And he was just like, well, then you should fix it. Run for school board, do something about it. And I've been on the Flagler County School Board now for 24 years. Wow. And it's been an honor and an absolute privilege to serve my community. I am a Democrat. I'm like the last standing Democrat in my county. Big believer in education.
We were very involved parents. My wife volunteered at every school my kids ever attended in one capacity or another. We felt like we were doing everything that we could to be involved in their education. Unfortunately, on February 14, 2018, my youngest daughter, Elena, was killed in Parkland. What I didn't know at the time was that what I can only describe as a cancer was occurring in our public schools. I know that these tragedies like Parkland are statistically rare, I get that. But they're a warning sign, a canary in the coal mine, if you will, of other problems that are going on in our public schools. So I sit on the State Board of Education. I've got a front row seat into what we're doing in the state of Florida and the changes we're making.
I got involved in education because I'm a mom, and parents are their children's first teachers. I'm a mom of 4 kids, and I was volunteering at my daughter's school, public school, and decided to run for school board because there were things that I was seeing that were happening in the public school system where adult needs and wants, adult wants, were being prioritized over the needs of children. I saw behind the education curtain, and then COVID happened, and all of America saw behind the education curtain. And we founded Moms for Liberty to help to educate and empower and unify parents to defend their parental rights at all levels of government.
So I actually kind of came into education by accident. When I was discharged from the Navy, I was a cryptologist, and my first job was helping unhoused veterans find sustainability. I stayed in what would be called workforce development, economic development, for about a decade or more. And I just thought, if we teach our kids how to do this, they won't get to be 40 and say, wow, I really hate being an accountant. And so I just thought it was a good, cost-effective way to bring competency and skill attainment into the classroom, into the school, so people could
unleash their career passions sooner rather than later.
3.5 years ago, I was just a dad in New York City. My daughter was at a very prestigious all-girls private school called the Brearley School, considered really one of the top K-12 schools in the country. She had been there 7 years. And after the summer of 2020, George Floyd, Black Lives Matter riots, everything about the school changed. The mission of the school changed. The school became what they called an anti-racist school. The curriculum changed. They tried to force us to sign a pledge that said not only would we support their anti-racism initiatives in the school, we would help support and teach them in the home. We refused. They didn't want to let my daughter in that first day of school. And when we decided not to re-enroll her, I said, somebody's got to try to light a little fire here, give the other parents cover to speak up. I wrote a letter. I mailed it to every family. I never thought for a minute that it would be read by any other than the 656 families of the school. It wound up going viral. And again, that's when sort of this whole, the critical race theory and the parents' movement sort of exploded on conservative media.
Can you give us some examples of some of the things that you saw happening at Brearley that you thought that prompted you to speak up about this?
I looked at the curriculum of what the curriculum looked like in the last year before the George Floyd summer in 2019 to 20, and what it looked like today, or the most recent one I had. And it's dramatically different. He looked at 10th grade, which was American history and American literature. The books they're reading are completely different. They've gotten rid of most of Mark Twain and F. Scott Fitzgerald and replaced it with sort of the identity politics-oriented multicultural books.
Well, like what? I mean, is it just writers who aren't white, or what books?
Well, right. I don't remember the names off the top of my head. It was a little while ago. But it's oppression-oriented ideology. These are not the books of great literature anymore, what it had been. You know, the history curriculum, if you looked at American history, 10th grade, American history, in 2019-20, the curriculum says, you know, looking at the founding of America, using source documents, et cetera. If you look at it, what it says now, it's looking at the foundings of America through the lens of anti-racist ideology or something like that. It's completely different.
And what was the demographic makeup of your school?
You know, it was what I'll call optically diverse. You know, it's. I mean, they focus an enormous amount on, you know, diversity. Probably what they'll call 40% people of color, if I'm guessing, something of that. Probably more now than it was then, something like that. That's my guess.
So my question is for everyone. I guess two questions. One is what Andrew is talking about, something that the rest of you have seen in other schools, and is what Andrew is talking about something that is positive as opposed to insidious? Iman, you've taken a whole bunch of notes. What do you want to share with the class?
Oh, so interesting. I'm trying to listen to everyone's point of view. Obviously, I'm a person of color, so this kind of hits home for me, of course. Thinking about the anti-racist ideology, I don't think anyone should be forced into signing a pledge of anything that they have to teach at home. I absolutely do not believe that, but I definitely understand why a conversation has to be had about having a more inclusive and holistic education system. Families should all have input on that, absolutely. I think that we should have a plethora of different, who are the authors of the books that we're reading. We should have a canon that is progressive and inclusive. That's the world that we live in today. Not taking away from Mark Twain, not taking away from any of the amazing historical canon that we've read. Shakespeare, I loved Shakespeare. Please don't ever stop teaching Shakespeare in schools. But I also really, really love some amazing authors that have come around today that look a little bit more like me. I can't have my child in a school where he cannot see himself in that. Or I walk into a classroom and there's not one book that has an author that is Black.
Can I say, what you just described is exactly what happened at our daughter's school.
Inclusion?
Meaning what?
Meaning a focus on those things. Diversity.
That's horrible.
It is. But now we're talking ideologically.
Yeah.
Okay, but I just want to say, I want to let others, but so, and I understand where you're coming from, obviously, having kind of spent the last 3.5 years trying to understand what you just said, where it came from. And I understand how most people view these words, diversity, inclusion, equity, obviously DEI, which we've all become so familiar with, as good words, because in the colloquial meaning of the words, they mostly, equity we can talk about, but diversity and inclusion are good things. But there is an ideology behind them that, again, is very, very different.
But you're an able-bodied white man.
Are you arguing against the inclusion of non-white, non-male authors in schools? I mean, which part of this
I'm arguing
feels like...
against the books of the great books, which mostly were written by white males. And not all of them. Not all of them.
That's interesting. I think that those books, and I'm sorry.
Because if you have an infinite amount of time in English class, this is where we run into trouble. Read everything. Same
Those
with
books have
history
been
class.
elevated.
Learn everything.
Those books have been elevated, though. It's not that those.
But they're
it's
not
not
as
that
good.
That's not.
They're not as good,
that's-
and they have an
that's-
ideology baked into most of what
That's a
they're
very
reading.
interesting concept. They're not as good because you haven't read them. I have
No,
read
they're not
them.
as good as works
if,
of literature.
If we don't know
And they're not, they
that
don't
they
bring
exist,
This is a luxury
then we
there's
don't
a
know.
divisiveness to this that I don't agree that you
Right.
need to
And
see
that's
yourself.
okay. Like-
I don't agree that my kid needs to
It's
see
easy for you to
themselves.
say that, though, as a white man.
And
Well, I have a
that's okay.
daughter.
That doesn't
I don't
matter.
care if
Well, we're not
she
talking about your
doesn't care
daughter.
Do you
if
not
she
want
reads
her to
women.
see
No, no, no.
herself?
I'm not saying I don't want.
Okay.
I'm saying focus on good education.
Okay.
And now we're getting to the
Why
we're
would
now
you-
getting to a much deeper level
Why
of
would you
what is
assume,
education.
Why would you assume something written by a woman or a person
No,
of
I'm not
color is
assuming.
not a good education?
If you go on the internet and Google, or maybe 10 years ago, the greatest works of literature,
And
the
that was determined
overwhelming
by-
majority are going to be written by white men. Now, maybe because women couldn't write back, it doesn't matter. The
Only
point of-
17% of black children in America are reading on grade level in fourth grade. That's according to the National
maybe
Assessment
if they
for
read
Educational
more
Progress
literature
and
that
our
looked like
nation's
that.
report
Look
card.
like that. They'd be
More
interested.
interested.
Might that be a way of
I think that
solving that problem?
I think that every child should be able to see themselves in books in their libraries and in their classrooms. And I think that it absolutely does help them to connect to different things that they're learning in schools. There's no doubt about it. I think that diversity in the classroom, especially in conversation, helps to breed critical thinking skills in children. But I think the fact that we're having this conversation when we have only a third of America's children reading on grade level, and again, these are the federal government statistics. These aren't my statistics. And I think we need to be talking about why are American children not learning to read in school? And that's happening in the grades of K through 3. So we're not getting to the great works yet. That has nothing to do with the conversation. Why are our children not learning to read in America's classrooms?
There's been political and ideological capture of our public school system for multiple generations. I'd go back 20, 25 years. During that time, when you look at inflation-adjusted spending in our public school systems, it's gone up 25, 30%. You can look at every state. But the outcomes, what Tiffany's focused on, the outcomes, our kids can't read.
Who's run Florida for 25 years?
That's what I was just going to say. I'm
Unions.
sorry.
Yeah,
no,
well,
I'm
Education
sorry.
is captured
Excuse me.
institution.
No,
Right.
no,
It doesn't
I'm sorry.
matter whether
Well, I'd
you
like to
live in
hear
a
from the
red
school
state
board
or a
member
blue
about-
state.
Excuse
I was
me,
a school board
Tiffany.
member as well, just to be
For
clear.
4 years. Excuse me. So
Oh, I'm sorry.
here-
24 years of capture does not a good school board member make.
Okay.
Oh, Tiffany,
so
you are rude.
anyway,
It's just the
the
truth.
one thing that you can't say is the Republicans have had supermajority control of the House and the Senate and the governor's office for over 20
May I
years.
speak to that, Ben?
What do you think
For
they should?
over 20 years. So you're all going to complain about
May I
it,
speak to
but
that for a
you've
moment?
all been in control of it for 20 plus years.
And what are some of the things you feel that the Republicans have done or have not done that have?
Okay, so let's just talk
how can we
about
blame them?
even school funding, right? In Florida, it's $10,000. We are at the bottom of the barrel as far as the state
Give
is
us more money.
concerned.
We'll fix it. Just give
No,
us more money.
no,
This is the
$40,000 per student in New York
It's
City schools, the worst outcomes in the country.
$10,000
Some
a
of the
student,
worst outcomes
right?
in the country.
10,438,000. I might got that wrong.
The money is not
So-
making, when you look at the budgets and you look at what our districts do, so this is a mischaracterization of what's happening in Florida.
That's right.
Sure, the legislature's Republican, sure, the governor's Republican,
For
but
20 plus
the
years.
school
Schools are
boards are
captured.
dominated by
That's not
nonpartisan
true. They
are.
Democrats
That's
that run the public
not
schools in the
anymore.
state
You
of
did
Florida.
just say like I'm
That's
the.
not
Well, that's
true.
true. Not
Not
apparently
in,
not
I mean,
anymore.
not across the state.
It's only
But
changing
this
now.
is
Ben. I'd like
only
to-
recently, since COVID, right, that we've actually had some Republicans win school board seats. So the ideological capture I'm talking about is
Maybe
at
in Broward, but
at the school board
statewide,
level down, right? It doesn't matter what the legislature can write laws. We can write rules at the State Board of Education. At the end of the day, what happens in the districts is where these problems are occurring. And what the districts tell us all the time is just give us more money, trust us, give us more money, and we'll fix the problems. And I'm telling you, we could give them $30,000 and the outcomes wouldn't change.
Well, guess what? You're giving us what we're giving, and Florida is not succeeding.
Unions have controlled school boards and school districts around the United States. And if more money would fix it, we would see that the more money that's spent in places, the better the educational outcomes would be. But the money doesn't go to the teachers, really. The administrative bloat has increased, and as the Department of Education in Washington, D.C. has grown and grown and grown, so has the bureaucracy and the need to report in the districts. And so it doesn't matter where you live. Unions have largely been controlled. You're right that
union is not strong.
Oh,
come on.
Oh, wait,
Okay.
no, are you kidding?
Okay.
Are you kidding?
I came from New York City. New York City's union was strong.
So here's the Republican legislature and our governor we've been trying to increase teacher pay since Governor DeSantis took office.
We have.
Billions
Teacher
of dollars.
pay is I think are we at 50 yet?
We're at
I have
49th.
God.
We are 49th. We are 49th in the,
I know
in
a
the
teacher
country
that has
for
literally been a
pay.
teacher for 15 years, and she is still making 50. She
Okay, so, I
literally
mean,
for
that's
15
not
years,
good, right?
52K. It was her next step up.
That's right.
The administrative bloat that we have seen in Florida public education sucks money out of the classrooms left and right. We need to let teachers teach, and we should be funding classrooms and teacher salaries as the highest priority. And anything else that is
do it.
happening, anything else
So
that is
fund it.
happening. Okay.
We are in Florida, newly famous for the so-called "Don't Say Gay" bill. So we can get into this now. All right, so this is fun, yeah. So this so-called "Don't Say Gay" bill bans instruction.
But can we call it what its title was? It was the
Yeah, so
Parental Rights in Education.
So the Parental Rights in Education Act bans instruction in gender identity and sexual orientation in grades pre-K through 8, and then 9 through 12, I think. You can talk about it a little in high school or something like that. I thought that we'd start by looking at a piece of material that I think epitomizes what the people who support this ban are afraid of. And this is a book that has been part of the curriculum in Seattle public schools. It was recommended to school children in New York City public schools, and it's been recommended by the Human Rights Campaign for use in elementary school classrooms. So this isn't just like a random thing. This is an actual book that is part of curricula.
I Am Jazz.
This is I Am Jazz, an autobiographical picture book by Jazz Jennings, a transgender activist who began her transition when she was 5 years old.
I'm going to explain my objection, because we just had a school shooting in Georgia.
Thank you.
And the school shooter ostensibly attacked that school because he didn't feel trans rights were being respected. This is a serious topic.
It is.
What we're teaching our kids about themselves and about who they are. But it has gotten to the point now where we've had 2 school shootings over an ideology and an indoctrination of our kids into thinking there's something wrong with them.
They were born in the wrong body.
But who's making them feel that way?
Where children are being
We're
told in public
telling
school
them-
classrooms that they were born in
telling
the wrong
them.
body. Do you know that Jazz, a little boy, had his penis split open and inverted, sterilized, never have an orgasm, has to stick a dilator in to keep an open wound open? This is a child. When I was 12 years old, I didn't know that I wanted to be a mom. If you had said to me, when I got my period, I have yet to meet a young girl who loves going through puberty. I didn't know that I want to breastfeed my children. And I had to listen to Chloe Cole, a detransitioner, sit on a stage where she said, don't know if I will ever be able to have a baby. And if I have children, I won't be able to breastfeed. And what I say to you, Ben, is this. These gender ideologues are stealing a future from girls that they don't even know that they want
And
yet.
boys.
These are
And boys,
children.
yeah.
But right now, I'll talk about ROGD and girls, and you're right, boys too.
This is how it's
got
happening,
you.
actually, Ben, is they're coming into media centers and libraries like we're at.
That's right.
And they're bringing adults in to read this material, and these young children are believing what's read because it's in a book.
They also believe in Santa, just to be clear.
Before this book was read, did we have trans people in the
There's
world?
no such thing as a transgender
Before
child.
this book was read, did we have gay people?
Yes.
There's no such thing
Before
as a
any of
transgender
this,
child.
so in my mind, I do know
And
that.
I think they're actually trans.
I'm just curious.
Would
Would
it
it
would
hold on.
exist
Hold
if
on.
we didn't
Especially
read
There was
boys.
transsexual. They changed it to transgender.
I mean,
That's
trans.
part of the whole ideology. No, they're different
Right,
things.
right. Okay,
They are
my
very
point
We
is.
got to get to the
okay.
ideology behind
Okay,
this if we really want to discuss
Transgender ideology is extremely homophobic. The majority of boys who end up going through transition or pushing a transition, if left alone to go through puberty, would turn out to be gay.
Have you heard this before?
Never.
By
What I
Judy.
have heard is that the suicide attempts and the suicide rate for boys
Right.
who feel like they are,
and I wonder if they
who do not
felt
have the
seen
support.
and heard, it would be
I know,
different.
and I understand transgender. I'm sorry, you are absolutely right. Transgender, where you actually transition. I don't know how comfortable I am with really agreeing with that. But when it comes to a
Can I
child who
explain
feels like they're
transgender?
something else and being able to kind of like wear a dress or wear heels or whatever it is,
But okay,
I'm
but
not gonna
Iman,
like.
but this is what's interesting.
Like I
is
don't
that,
have the. I'm not even a part of that community for me to really have an opinion on it. To be really quite honest, but for the students who feel like they are.
Well, neither of
they
us,
would
we all
rather-
have opinions.
They would rather die than be. You know what I mean?
And
Because nobody
that's
is giving them a place to be seen or to be respected. That to me is a problem as well.
But
I
what the
think
data
if
shows
we're going
now,
to care about all the
which is
students, then
why-
we need to care about all the students.
We don't need to be having conversations about surgeries and puberty blockers and whatever. First off, the percentage is very, very low, right? Very low. You're talking 1%, maybe.
Skyrocketing. You
And
have
so-
schools in California where they have.
I'm sorry, I was
8%,
right in the middle of
9%.
a sentence. Thank you. So I think the conversation with the place that school psychologists the role that they play, the role that the larger school family plays, the conversation should be much more centered on how do we support the child and the family as they navigate this very complicated landscape.
What is the message you think that a child who does not conform to gender stereotypes gets from this book?
So you have a child that's experiencing mental distress. First of all, it's being introduced now in kindergarten. These are children who really, and it is being mandated in some states that this is taught.
Actually, is that in your experience? Have you seen this being in kindergarten? Do kids talk about gender?
I think that I'll be really transparent. I think that if a child is already in a classroom that already has this mindset that this is who they are, then of course it's going to come up in conversation between kindergartners. Because the child is coming to school, we're in a public education system, we're going to have different kids that come to school. So
Well,
if
as
your
opposed
kid
to
is
like
in
it
the
being
classroom-
introduced as
I
curriculum.
mean, we are in Florida, man.
Yeah,
so,
that doesn't
no,
happen.
absolutely not.
Right,
but
but it will happen.
Definitely
if
not.
if
But by
yeah.
middle school, absolutely, because there's going to be kids there that are trans.
This
I'm so
has
sorry,
no
even the
place
terminology.
in our schools and public education. Our kids aren't even learning how to read. And we're telling them they've been born in the wrong body. There are 2 sexes, 0 genders, and infinite personalities. Telling children there's something wrong with them because they like to play with different toys or like the color pink is abuse.
I find this very compelling. Do you not?
Yeah, I mean, I know I can only speak from experience in our district. We've dealt with situations like this for years. Like I remember there was a case back in like 2002, but it was always discreet. It was always with the family. It was always behind the scenes,
however,
school
yes.
administration, allowing a child to use a different bathroom or whatnot. It was never this public conversation. Parent was always involved in the decision making.
Is it not now ubiquitous, this kind of expectation of teachers that they will affirm and respect and we want to be inclusive and all of these very nice sounding words, which we all sort of, they all sound so good. And when inclusive means that like if a child says, these are my pronouns and I need you to use them, you know, it all depends on a teacher's personality. Maybe you just say, well, I want to be nice, of course I'll use your pronouns. But teachers are afraid to even sort of probe at that. Well, why do you say these are your pronouns?
Well,
why
no,
do you
teachers,
know?
And now
right
with
now,
Title
teachers will
IX
not touch
Teachers will not do-
anything right now
Exactly.
like that. They're very,
and
very
that,
afraid.
I think is a problem because, you know, there is no pushback to it. A teacher can get into a lot of trouble if they, right?
What
Or they
I
can
was-
lose it,
problem.
or in Florida, they can lose their certification
Yes.
for actually affirming it.
Yes.
And then Florida
So
has
there's
taken
2
the total
sides,
opposite
which is
tack.
so interesting to me
Right,
because parental rights should, or parental rights in general, should really go both
Well, let's-
ways. And
let's-
I feel like we're running
Parents
into
don't have the right to cut out their
But it
children's
does have
healthy
both
body
I think it
parts.
should all be, you know what I mean? Like
We've
sterilize their
put the
kids.
parents in charge of making those decisions. So we've taken it away from the school district. And I'm glad that it happened the way it did in your district, but I don't think it was by policy. I think it was by accident that you
No,
handled
that's just
it.
our procedure. It's not
But
policy,
Title
it's
IX is trying to
procedure.
change that.
So-
The Biden-Harris administration just did a total rewrite of Title IX, and what they have said is that they have redefined sex to include gender identity and sexual orientation. That means boys on your girls' sports teams, boys in your girls' bathrooms. That means secrets being kept from parents, and this is federal policy that is being pushed down into schools.
So I understand that. You look at the LGBTQ community and you look at transgender.
There's no such thing as LGBTQ community.
Well,
Lesbian, gay, bisexual is a sexual orientation.
They are
Transgender is a
completely
mental
different.
distress, and Q is a political theory that has no limiting principle, which is meant to turn everything on its head and to reject normal and to reject anything that becomes
thank
normal,
you.
including
Thank you.
LGBT.
But you can see
by
why
the way.
Colleen would refer to them that way because
But there are
Correct.
students that are gay
Correct.
in our school district. Period. End of story.
Yes.
Sure.
Okay, that's all I'm saying.
The least interesting thing about a child should be their sexual orientation.
Okay.
I can't believe we're talking to kids about
Okay,
sex
okay,
all the
could you
time.
let
No,
Colleen say what she's
actually,
going to say here?
we're not talking about children's sexuality all the time.
Schools are.
You guys are always talking about
I'm sorry,
sexual.
that's absolutely true. Like honestly, I go.
I mean, we're
listen,
not. The
I
only
cannot
people
convince-
ever talking
Listen,
about this are
I
all of you.
cannot convince a kid to
Gaslighting.
read. Okay, I definitely cannot convince them to change their sex. I'm sorry. Like in my classrooms, like I literally cannot get them to do homework half the time, and I'm not like I'm not
sorry.
disregarding
You're wrong.
anything that anyone's saying. What it really comes down to is like I don't care. I do think that there should be some sort of notification that happens, and if it has to happen with the
can I ask a
support
question?
of a clergy or the support of whatever it takes for that family to be on the same side and make sure that that student is supported so
The
they don't
bottom
go
line,
kill themselves.
we're responsible
It's
to
great,
educate all
but
children,
But
protect
really, we
all
really,
children.
I don't
So do you
think.
agree?
I just
do
want
both of you?
to. I just
hang
want
on,
to make
hang
sure
on.
that kids
I
feel
like what you
valued in
so
my
do
environment.
both of you agree or disagree with reading this to kids in a school?
Do
based on
I
what you both just
agree
said?
with reading this book in school?
You said you don't
would you
care
read this
about
book
it,
to- do you think
and you
this
said
book
you
should
wanted
be
to
read?
include
I
all
don't.
kids.
I'm going to tell you why. In
Yeah.
all reality, I don't. Only because I do know that there's going to be some families that would be totally against it, and I don't feel like that's.
Okay, what if
and I don't feel
what
like
if you
that's
polled
right.
the families and they were
If
okay?
all the families were okay with reading that book, absolutely. That's what they
Awesome.
do anyway right now.
Yeah.
You want Mark Twain read in your classrooms. So that's literally
Intelligent
what we
design.
do. Parents decide what they want in the curriculum. Teachers come in, they also teach it. Like that, it's all been a society-based
Andrew was saying if there is a philosophy that maybe all the parents get behind, like intelligent design, creationism, right? I think his point is that even if it's popular, if you yourself know that it is wrong, or if it just is wrong, just
You don't have to
objectively,
then you don't have to. You're not required to.
Right.
You should have a choice.
All of this coded language that's, social contagion, indoctrination, all of these like really ugly, aggressive words that adults are using don't help children one iota. Not one.
As
That's
an
right.
educator, what my job is to bring those children into school, allow them to feel included in the environment, teach them how to think critically, allow them to feel valued and like they are part of my society, and move on.
Your
job is to teach them how to
but
read.
in
I
all
disagree with
reality,
that.
like
That's what you
that's
just
my
said, and I
job.
respect what you just
Right.
said, is an ideology.
Correct.
What I
What's
vehemently
the
do.
ideology?
what students shouldn't
Diversity.
Care
I'm so
about
sorry.
this-
Go ahead.
this-
I want
Kids
you to
valued
what we're
is an
experiencing-
ideology.
Kids being valued is an ideology. You don't want your
You're
child
there
to feel
to
valued?
teach. I like what you said. I like your definition of education. That is your job.
A child
Teach
to feel
the kids to
valued.
read.
Teach the kids
Listen,
to
but we've
read,
also
not
discussed the
teach them
fact
to
that
be
guess
valued.
what?
This is where
But guess what?
education went
We've
wrong
also-
100 years
But
ago
I'm
with John
sorry,
Dewey
I understand,
progressivism.
and guess what? That was when we were teaching kids how to be factory workers because the education system was started so we could have factory workers, and I think that that's
But it
a
was
big
much better
part.
than actually
But
100
guess
years ago
what?
than it
Those
is
kids
now.
that were given A's were taught
want a
how to
carbon
think.
calendar.
We do not want kids to be taught what to think. We want to teach them how to think now. That is the
Oh,
difference.
I agree with that.
That's the problem, is that we had this one canon and we had kids that were going to go off to the
No, no, no.
factory, and we had. That's the difference
No,
now.
what we are arguing
No, yes, value,
is that
yes.
you,
soft skills
as the
and
education
values
system,
are
are
important.
teaching what to
Yes.
think.
But just
It's
as
not
a
an
matter of like,
ideology.
as a matter of getting children to
future-focused.
learn, it's much easier to get a child to learn if
If they like
feel
it and
like
they
if
feel
they
included.
feel yes,
Thank
and if they
you.
feel comfortable and safe and all those nice
What's
things.
wrong with that?
So I don't know that
doesn't
like
work.
That's the way you like to
Doesn't
learn.
work.
I bet when you go to your job.
We went from progressive education, changed
Inclusion.
education
How
enormously.
I'm so sorry.
Hang on.
Go ahead.
And it went from teacher-centered to child-centered. That's one of the major
Okay.
changes, which is saying exactly what you said. In order for kids to be happy, they have to learn. In order to learn, they have to read the things they want. They have to see themselves in the books. It doesn't work.
These things are just inflammatory, like bright, shiny objects.
No.
Yeah,
No.
Tiffany, I swear.
What? I'm sorry.
Then let me say it for her. No, you're wrong.
Okay,
You're absolutely wrong.
listen.
well, where have we seen? I
Wait,
mean, like,
listen to me.
I'm sorry.
We have a system that's built on seat time. We've had 50 years of unfunded mandates. We have not added 1 minute to the school day, not 1 day to the school year, right? Those are the things that we can control. We cannot control how somebody views their body. That's not what we can control. What we can control is the policy that surrounds education and how we deliver it to our children.
And we're not
That's
talking
what
about,
we're here to
we're not
talk about.
talking about controlling how they feel about themselves or how they think.
That's
I
not
don't
what
know.
she's talking about, though.
But she just said that.
No.
She just said it.
She's not talking about controlling the feelings of students.
She said
She's
we cannot
talking
control
about-
the feeling.
We
We're
can't
not
control-
asking.
we can't-
We're
We
not
can
trying to
control
do
what we
that.
spend time on in the classroom and spending time on I Am Jazz when we only have one
I'm
third of
talking
American
about right
children-
here, sitting
when we
here
only
right
have
now.
one-
We have to move on to this book stuff. So, House
goodness.
Bill 1069, signed into law last year in Florida, among other things, establishes a process for parents to object to any school library book and requires the books be immediately reviewed or immediately removed while these objections are adjudicated. Now, Tiffany, because I know this is something that's been pushed by Moms for Liberty. No. Well, then clear this up. Do you think that Florida's law, or the law that I just described, which is Florida's law, is this a good model for the rest of the country?
I think that the biggest concern really has been in Florida and other places that there didn't seem to be a process for school as to how library books, were making their way into the library, how they were being reviewed. And so I sat on a school board for 4 years. Were there books that were in the library that weren't appropriate for public school while I was on the school board? Absolutely. I think that there were books that librarians, in some cases, were shocked to see what the content was in the library books. So I think that, you have curriculum that is adopted in every school district. Parents are involved in as part of that curriculum adoption process, and that parents should absolutely have the ability to look at what the books and the materials that are in the schools, and if they have concerns about them, to go to their local school board, their elected officials, and express their concerns.
Okay, so is this law which says that if a parent objects to a book, that the book is immediately removed while it is reviewed? And I mean, is that do you feel? Do you
I
stand
think
behind
there
this
has to
policy?
be a process that's in place in order for materials to be questioned and the school board to be able to take action on that. And I just want to be clear. The mission of Moms for Liberty is to unify, educate, and empower parents to defend their parental rights at all levels of government. We're a parental rights organization. The book issue was something that we didn't start, but was actually brought to a lot of our moms and they were made aware of. And I do feel that parents felt they had a moral obligation to take action when they saw the graphic sexual content that was in these books.
Okay, so this bill has resulted in the removal of hundreds of books from library shelves. This includes books by Toni Morrison, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie.
To be clear, the school boards are the ones that are making the decision about which books are removed.
No. This law says that if a parent objects to a book, it's
parent-
whisked off the
isn't
shelves.
it parent review?
The school board is the one that makes the decision, and Ryan was a part.
Ultimately about
Yes.
like whether
Yeah.
we put the book back on the shelf.
Correct.
But,
Or take it away.
But
Or the
I
superintendent.
mean, parents are going to
sure.
ask. Here's the thing: parents. I mean, even on school board, you spent 24 years. Parents are going to ask a lot of questions. Some of them are going to be, things that you want flagged that you're aware of. Some of the things that parents are going to bring up, you're going to say either maybe there's nothing I can do about that, or that, this is something that's a policy in our district and we're going to continue doing it. But parents have the right to ask questions about anything that their children are being exposed to in schools, and local school boards are elected. That's why American public education is so beautiful in many ways, because across the world, parents don't have the type of representative government that we do in America. Local control is incredibly important.
Okay, but this law has resulted in the removal of books that I don't think any of us would call pornographic, books by Judy Blume, Jodi Picoult, Margaret Atwood. So my question is for everyone, is this law too broad?
I think it's very important to be honest about the fact that when we talk about funding and school library funding, it's minuscule. And that's something that I know that Ryan has spoken about publicly, about the fact that we should be investing in our libraries, in our schools, and we should be investing in literacy specialists to help our children to identify good books that are going to help to enhance their learning. We have standards in American public education. In Florida, we have the best standards. It's a roadmap that shows very clearly what a child should be learning in any given year. And then there's curriculum that's selected in the school that matches to those standards. And so the idea that every book that has ever been written should be in a public school library is just ridiculous. Jodi Picoult, as you spoke about, well, that's a book that you can buy in the grocery store while you're checking out your groceries. Should a book that you buy at the grocery store that's a female romance novel should taxpayer money be spent on that book and put on a library shelf? I think it's a good debate to have.
I don't see anything wrong with parents reviewing the materials that are part of the curriculum.
But it's also
why is
what
this-
parents.
Keep going.
So it's very selective. It's very selective. I'll give you an example. We had a situation in our district about one particular book. All Boys Aren't Blue. And it's a story about a young African-American boy, well, man.
He's a boy in the
who-
book.
Okay, let's keep going.
I
He's a
just-
minor.
I just said that.
Oh, okay.
A young boy, it's kind of his coming of age, right? He loses his virginity when he's in college, later in life. He was molested by his cousin when he was younger, I think 12 or something like that.
He was anally raped by an adult family member.
Okay,
Tiffany,
and this is something.
and this happens.
So keep going.
And so I read the book from cover to cover because we had a school board member that actually filed criminal charges against our superintendent and wanted the superintendent arrested. Ridiculous, right? When I say it's up to certain parents, if I am an African-American mother of a young gay man, I don't have a problem with him reading this book.
Oh my gosh.
Excuse me, molestation happens.
We should do a lot
Okay.
better than throw a library book on the shelf.
And let me
hope that
tell
a
you
child is
something.
being
Is this not the
molested.
point
Judy Blume's Forever is raunchier than that book.
Well, Judy Blume's been pulled from shelves
I
too.
know, right? And we're of that. Some of us are of that generation of Judy Blume. But Forever was a pretty naughty book.
I mean, these are
my
books that describe the reality of teenage sexuality, and that is a thing that
Right.
makes some parents very uncomfortable.
And I'm just saying that if parents want to opt out, right, Tiffany, if you don't want your child to read that book, then we have a process in Florida where the parents can opt out of that book.
Does the parent have to name the books
Yes.
that are not?
Yes.
So I
But
guess
now,
can we
if
tweak
I'm a
this?
parent
I'm
and
sorry.
I want my child to read that book, I should have a right to
is
let
this-
my
is this
child
not kind
read
of
that
the
book.
way out of this that sort of satisfies people feel very passionately about this on both sides. Could you not have a system where a parent can say, hey, every book that my kid checks out of the library, it has to have my approval?
Why don't
Wouldn't
we
that be
just-
sort of the fastest way to sort of resolve this
I
problem
mean,
and move on?
it's more or less like that.
Would you like me to, can I answer?
Yeah.
Maybe we could just take all of the books that have graphic sexual content. And I'm going to push back on you for a moment because you said this is normal, children having coming of age sexual
necessarily normal,
experiences.
but-
It's not normal.
He didn't lose
It
his virginity until he was in college.
I'm sorry. Being anally raped by your adult family member is losing your virginity.
Okay.
Being anally raped by your adult family member is not normal childhood sexual
I'm
experience.
sorry,
and
who
I think
said
it's
it
insulting.
was?
And I think it's insulting to say that any black parent with a gay child would be okay with their child reading that book.
You're being
That's
absolutely ridiculous and you're putting words in my mouth. That is not what I said.
So
I think your point was that a book that
Don't
speaks to a
choose.
certain...
why don't we
Right.
put all of the books with graphic sexual content that are in the libraries behind like a curtain, like a special area? And then if parents want their children to be exposed to graphic sexual content,
Porno
they can
site.
go into the raunchy naughty room, as she shared.
I
and
guarantee
there's
you,
no-
I know you're being sort of
Is that a
facetious.
good idea?
Well, I know
had
you're
the
being
same
facetious
visual.
here, but I guarantee you that if you did something like that,
shows
the
that
kids
we are,
would
like,
all
very
flock to
That's
the
right.
naughty
They'd all
section.
flock to it.
And also, this is
half
what has
of the books the
happened,
kids
hasn't-
never even knew about.
I mean,
now you
only
have-
a third of children in American
wait, hold
public
on.
schools can read on grade level. They can't even read.
Yeah, what's the problem, Tiffany? They can't read them anyway.
The problem is that we're spending a lot of time talking about these very controversial, hot button issues. When
Well,
all we
they're
want to
culture
do,
wars.
we want the kids
So if we
to
would just
learn.
shut up
I
and be
want
okay with it,
no,
then the
that's
kids would
not what I'm
learn to
saying.
read.
Is that we'd rather
But
spend more
what you-
time
but
on
I don't know
the
that-
math and the reading and
You
the.
have
We're the
problem
disruptors
is-
for calling out
problem
the
is-
graphic sexual content.
Here's
We're the
it's
problems.
not about graphic.
I don't
It's not all about graphic. So let's talk about this other thing. There's a
It's
Florida
just a
district
small.
that
It's
removed.
just a very small piece of it. is,
There's
I
a
think.
Florida district that removed all volumes of something called Assassination Classroom. So here's a description of this book series. Koro Sensei has already blown up the moon. He promises not to do the same thing to the Earth on one condition, that he be allowed to teach a certain junior high school remedial class for 1 year. Now the students of Class 3E are the only ones standing in the way of the destruction of the planet. So Moms for Liberties defended this book being removed because she said, well, we don't want kids to think it's okay to kill their teachers.
Oh my gosh.
So my question for you is, what
they
keeps
kill their
irreverent books protected from parents who don't seem to be able to separate fantasy from reality? I mean, because it's not just sexual...
I'm going to pitch that question to Ryan, whose daughter was killed on Valentine's Day in 2018. 3 teachers lost their life. 14 students lost their lives. So Ryan, do you think that we should be encouraging books about students killing their teachers in
Do you
school
think?
and
Yes.
public
Do you blame
schools?
sci-fi books about someone from another planet who's wants to teach a remedial class? I mean, does this have to do with that?
Look, I think It can. It can, because when a book gets into a library or a media center or whatever we're calling these things these days, right? There's a sanction that's happening. That district or that school, that principal, those teachers, that librarian is putting a stamp of approval on those things and saying this is okay material, right? It's on our shelves because it merits being on our shelves, and thereby they're saying it's okay. What we've done in Florida is said no, parents get to decide for their minor children through their elected school boards whether or not a book meets a community standard. Now, you've pointed out it was gone in one district, but it's probably in 66 other districts around the state of Florida. That community made that decision, and I'm okay with that. And Tiffany's right. This happens beneath the school board. The school board often doesn't know what books are in their libraries. The principals often don't know what books are in their libraries. The librarian gets a list from a national organization that reviews these books and says these things are great things for kids to read. Those organizations, in large part at the national level, have been ideologically captured, and they are in the business of promoting a certain ideology and indoctrinating kids. So they push those books into our school libraries.
Most of the books that we're talking about
and
now from the shelves aren't about ideology. They're not teaching
most
gender
of them
things.
Aren't.
They're not teaching.
Most of them aren't, but there are those that are in there that are troubling, and that is the least probably objectionable book you could have asked us to read today, because
You're
some
kidding.
of them
This?
are.
Listen, I watched something that said that the Bible was pulled from. The Bible was pulled
been
from a
challenged.
school.
It's
it
been
has
challenged.
been, and I think that from both sides. Like
That's exactly what I was going to
because
say.
in
Is
all reality, but
how
again,
do we? I think the fight. I think
this could lead to the Bible being
I think
pulled.
the Bible has it.
Parents-
The Bible
I'm talking
has been
about,
pulled.
I'm going to set the bar really low. No incest, rape, pedophilia.
So the Bible.
No, but it's wrapped in.
Gender clear. So
A very serious question, especially to Ryan. How do we not, in your words, indoctrinate children to the left, right? And not swing too far, right? Where we're making people children who are
Yeah,
gay,
where's the balance?
where BIPOC children, women, girl students. How do we center it in such a way that I'm not teaching your kid to be a bra burner, right? We'll put it that way. And you're not teaching my kid that women should be barefoot and pregnant, for example, right? How do we, from a governing standpoint, from a good governance standpoint, your job is to go straight down the middle.
So we've done that. We have what are called the Florida Best Standards. Tiffany mentioned it earlier.
Okay.
You won't find any of
So
either
you're
ideology.
You're going to personally commit right now that you're going to go find those history books and you're going to make sure that they don't say enslaved people should be grateful.
They don't say that.
They do
'cause
say
that's
that.
not
I'll
in the
show you the screenshot.
But
I brought
that's
it with
not
me
in-
because I knew you would say they don't. They do.
That's not in the standard.
Do
what
they
it,
not?
What it
That's in the
says
standard.
is, what it says specifically in that standard, and I questioned this when it came before our board, and I talked to the author of the standard, who you may or may not know is African American. He wrote the standard. And what it says is that during the time of slavery, there were slaves that materially benefited by selling services.
I say that's indoctrination.
I agree.
I
agree.
That's what I'm asking.
listen.
Your job is to represent every
What does this
Floridian
say?
of all ideologies.
It does not say slavery was good. We are still struggling with the evil of slavery to this day. We're still debating.
Systemic racism?
No. But
That's
we're
battling
still,
with the
we're
that's what
still,
that means.
we're still
How
as
do
a
you-
country
That's what that means.
struggling with this evil, pernicious
Absolutely.
evil that plagued us for generations. Now,
I agree.
what I do say is
That's
that
critical race
at
theory.
great cost, we eliminated slavery. And that was because of the Western tradition, the great truths, and this desire for Western civilization to understand the world we live in and to seek and define truth. What queer theory intersectionality and all these other ideologies that are trying to be thrust on the American society right now, are trying to say Western civilization is somehow inherently bad, systemically racist, inherently that every culture is of equal.
Is that a fair?
I'm going to be really.
Actually, it's not true.
I
it's
teach
just
Black
not
history.
True.
Okay, Black history in general. Just everybody should be recognized in history. Everybody's story should be told in history, right?
Good, bad, and ugly.
Good, bad, and ugly. Exactly. We should always have that. We have a situation, getting back to your point, where comments like that, where and the talking point is always by an African American professor, like
token.
I don't care. Like in all reality, and a majority of my community does not care. Okay. That is indoctrination. You are telling my child that enslavement was slightly beneficial for them. No, it was not.
No. We're not telling your child that. We're not telling.
But that's what I'm getting from
when
that.
we go on break, I'll get you.
And from what the standards read.
Let me clarify.
And that's what we're getting.
Let me clarify.
That's the issue.
Let me clarify.
It's okay because I've read the standard and I know
it's not okay because
the problem is
it's not indoctrination.
Listen, but it's not indoctrination.
Indoctrination means. Can I just define indoctrination?
No.
You're having
every single comment you've made today. Every single
I want to hear what you're saying.
Every single comment that has been made today about indoctrination has been discussing this very right-leaning idea.
Yes.
We're missing the fact that there are other ideas. It's only indoctrination when it's happening to the right side, but not when it's happening. And I don't really honestly, I don't care. I'm not on the left, the right, I don't care. The point is that we have a groups of people that use this term indoctrination, parental rights, without recognizing that I want rights too. Right. And I believe that that's indoctrination. Honestly, again, like, this is not an issue that I have ever really seen. Western are evil. Like, no, the conversation is, this is history, this is what happens, this is how we can change the future.
Do you know what I had about this issue, though? One of the things I had a question about.
Right, sure.
This was actually a standard that came out of AP courses in the College Board, and no one ever really questioned it before. So I'm just curious. It feels sometimes like you say, the right-leaning stuff. I don't think kids being taught about sexually graphic content or having exposure to sexually graphic content. I don't care what their orientation, their sexual orientation is.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
But what I'm saying is that it seemed like when it became Ron DeSantis or Republicans, it became this like fight. It was all. But this has been around for a while, and I'm just so curious why we haven't addressed it before this moment.
It comes down to exactly the same conversation around trans rights. All of this stuff has been blown up by people who honestly, and then it becomes, if you don't want that in there, I don't want this either. And if we're going to talk about changing things for everybody,
the honest truth of slavery and that slavery existed and that it was horrible and that we worked hard as a country to get rid of slavery and to try to move forward out of it is very different than there are two biological sexes, men and women, and we're teaching children in classrooms that they're born in the wrong body.
What about social and emotional learning?
Those are two totally different things.
That's a very, you know what I mean? Social and emotional learning.
Social and emotional learning is a violation of parental rights because it is encroaching on my point.
But what about her rights?
It is encroaching on. But every parent has a fundamental right to direct the other.
What about her rights?
Andrew, you had something you wanted to say in response to something that Amal was saying.
That's all I'm saying is that me too. I'm not saying that you're wrong.
But we have government schools.
I'm agreeing with you.
We have government schools.
We have public schools.
They're government schools.
We have public schools for public good.
Fine. Public schools run by the government.
We have public schools that are saying that we should teach kids how to have empathy, right? And we don't like that.
But parental rights are fundamental. It's not a right the government gives you. It's not a right they can take away.
And I want the right to tell you that I want that standard removed.
I want to hear from each of you. You can give a little closing statement. If there's anything you heard today that gives you any kind of pause and complicates your view in any way, I would like to hear it. So Ryan, why don't we start with you?
So the reason we're having so much trouble getting together and sort of figuring this out, I think, is we have two different ideas about America.
I think that's the way America's always been, though. And I think that's the beauty of this, having those conversations.
It is a beauty, but I think it's important that we have a fundamental and inherent belief that America is good, not perfect, but good. And the ideas upon which our republic were founded were good.
Yes.
And yes, we had terrible compromises that we went through to get where we are, but we are the wealthiest, freest, most actualized people in the history of the world. And we don't, I think, understand why that is. And if we don't imbue that to the next generation, it's very likely we're going to lose it.
You just said yes to, he said that we were built on these.
Yeah, I love the ideas. I love the idea of freedom for every man, woman. You know what I mean? Like, I love history. I love Alexander Hamilton is my, it's my jam. And like seeing that, but even in there were two very opposing, like viewpoints of what freedom even meant and who it was meant for.
The fact of the matter is education is the most powerful economic development tool known to man, right? But we complicate it in the United States because we educate all kids, right? In other countries, they don't have to educate disabled kids. In other countries, two different minorities or two different religions might not be allowed in the same class, right? Women, girls, and boys not allowed in the same class.
Not allowed to go to school at all.
Right, exactly. So we have made by virtue of inclusion. I said it. We as Americans have made education complicated on purpose. We decided to do that. And so therefore it is incumbent on us to stop throwing bombs and get to work.
Maybe this is too much for some folks, but I truly believe public education is the thread that weaves us all together. That is what will save or has always been a part of our democracy.
And it's unraveling.
And if you unravel it, which is what it intentionally feels like is happening, if you unravel it, then you are really, truly...
completely opposite sides.
Right. You are really, truly destroying our democracy and our strengths as a country.
I think what's comforting is that we all mean well here. There are things at the margin that I think that came up today that we could agree on, that some of what you brought up. Pay teachers more, you get better teachers, that would be good for our kids. But we really do live in different worlds. The right and the left use completely different dictionaries. However you want to define democracy, I think we would all agree we lose it if we can't talk about difficult subjects and have these kind of conversations. But we can't even get to stage one here, other than at the margin on education, because we are using two completely different dictionaries. And that's something that I don't think most people appreciate or understand.
Thank you all for doing this. I really feel like we solved education today.
We can go home now, y'all.
Now you can go. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
very, very, very much.
Yeah, right.
Thank you. I hope it was.
It was.
Thank you.
Thank you.